is in trafficking in persons. And so today we're going to look at what Parliament has been doing and, of course, the amends that are underway. Now, of course, the proposed Anti-Slavery Bill 2018 will seek to repeal the Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act 2009 and make provision for the prohibition of slavery, servitude, and forced or compulsory labor, as well as provide the fit repatriation of course, these particular victims. And it's a conversation that you and I need to really listen in keenly so we can get to know. And we have had this conversation just before we took a break, and it's on how much do you know? How much protection do you know that the law actually provides for you? And so this conversation is very critical, and Rita will be telling us who we are joined with.
We're joined by a member of Parliament from the Parliament itself, and he is Honorable Herbert Eriko. You're most welcome to the show. Good morning.
Good morning.
And why is he here? Because he's one of the key people that are at the center stage of making sure that this bill, which is the anti-slavery bill, will come to see day of light in Parliament. It will become a law at some point, which will be able to prohibit slavery, servitude, and forced labor. Yes. Of course, when we say the word slavery, one would wonder, slavery? It's 2019, it's the 21st century. We don't have something like that in the country.
Well, thank you so very much. Good morning, viewers. I'm happy to be with you on this show at NTV. Yes, many times we have construed slavery to mean the old times slave trade and the like. But slavery is happening now. Slavery goes on in our houses. Slavery happens in workplaces and the like. That is why the concept of modern day slavery was coined by the Commonwealth countries, because it was realized eventually that despite the fact that a law that bars all forms of slave trade and slavery had been passed way back in the 1940s, in the modern day, there have been new elements of slavery that we do not actually see them manifesting themselves. Sometimes you find that people are actually held in slavery, but they cannot even realize for themselves that they are slaves. Sometimes people get disguised in as though they are in employment, and yet you are actually a slave. And many times you find that there are people who happen to be agents or perpetrators of such slavery, because in itself you cannot enslave yourself. You may be a slave out of just ignorance, but there is somebody who is championing that happening to you. So that is why we are coming up with a law that tries to unpack what hitherto is hidden about the facets of slavery. In today's world, there's been a key problem in terms of lack of employment, for instance. Right. People are so desperate to do something and earn a living. So you walk into what you presume to be an employment contract, but actually you're going into some sort of debt bondage. So this is what we are talking about. We are talking about the new aspects of slavery, which are faceted in terms of forced labor, servitude, debt bondage, sexual exploitation, things such as trafficking itself is one of the facets of what constitutes the modern day slavery. So those are what we are looking at in this law.
Modern day slavery, as you say, the modern day has pushed situations to change. The mindset has changed for very many people. Like you said, people are struggling to get jobs these days, and they end up caught in situations that they wouldn't have been before. But at what point does one get it in their head that, you know, this is slavery? One, on both sides, because I think the victims today, the people who are practicing slavery and the people who are being slaved around, are, I think, victims of not having enough knowledge about slavery. So as me, the person that is going to be enslaved, at what point do I know, okay, this is slavery right here? And the person that is employing as well, because we have seen very many people working in homes, in families, and when you go there, you will say this is slavery right here. But the person that is employing that person is thinking, well, I am paying this person this amount of money. I'm keeping them around the house and all this. So at what point does one know that I am being enslaved, and at what point does the other person know that now I am the slave master now?
Now, thank you. Two things here. One, from the point of the slave master, or those people that enslave others, you know, there is a common adage that says ignorance of the law is no excuse. So you may say, I do not know that I'm enslaving somebody, but the aspects of adherence to the principles of human rights should be able to address your mind to the fact that what constitutes employment contract, what constitutes enslavement, and what constitutes holding people in bondage. Anyway, on the other part, for the case of the victims, they may actually be aware or not be aware that they are practically slaves, except in the circumstances where it becomes torturous or where it becomes some sort of extreme punishment and deprivation. That's when you notice that I am actually a slave. So that's why we are saying, as leaders, as parliament, you do not wait and see a vice happening, reoccurring, and escalating. You always come up with a law in order, one, to detect, prevent, mitigate, and as well deter the happening of such. So how do we get people to realize that this is a vice that must be dealt with? There are elements when you deal with public policy and legislation. One is that you look at the aspect of realization as a nation that this is becoming prevalent, and it's something that we must check. So for instance, from the aspect when Uganda came up with the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act, we were thinking so much more about those that moved people from one place to the other, with the idea of probably taking them when they are conscious of what they are going to do, or when they are not conscious of what they are going to do. At the end of the day, they end up being slaves. We were dealing with having somebody leave, for instance, Soroti, where I come from, and get to Kampala and find themselves in enslavement. But now we later got to know that actually you can be within Soroti and be a slave within that same confinement. So that is where now it brings one aspect of public policy, where you need sensitization, awareness, and education.
Speaking of awareness, now that we're on TV and we have quite a number of viewers, how then do you tell the face of slavery if it's without violence? How do you tell that?
Oh, you can tell the face of slavery. For instance, when it is an aspect to do with servitude, hours of work. Under normal circumstances, and according to ILO provisions, work is defined as that which ordinarily is 8 hours out of the 24. Where somebody works beyond the 24 hours, I mean the 8 hours, usually they pay what they call overtime. But look at the case of servitude that happens in our homes on an everyday basis. Most of us here have domestic workers, for instance. They are the first to wake up in your house most of the time. They will work through the day. You probably in between there have the opportunity to leave your office, go out and take a coffee in a social place, go and see friends, and come back. You'll find this lady or gentleman working in your premises. They will be the last to go to bed after you and all your children and probably your relatives have gone to bed. At the end of the day, when you assess the relative pay based on the work input, this person in many of our situations in Uganda are earning 100,000, 200,000, 300 if really. So that is something that you as a person who is responsible for enforcement, responsible for looking at people's welfare, that's where you notice that there are issues to do with slavery here. Number two, you can also notice that somebody is in enslavement when they do not have a choice whether to live or stay in employment. Many times you find people going into employment, they are told that when you come here, you'll probably earn so much, you'll probably be entitled to leave of such and such a number of days, but when you get there, the first thing that happens to you is that you surrender the originals of your academic transcripts and certificates. You surrender your official travel documents and probably as well as your national registration. So for as long as this person that is holding you in employment, quote unquote, enslavement, desires, they will not let you have the liberty to get out of this employment. That is now what they call debt bondage, because you are conscripted because of the fact that either your documents are held or probably you owe these people a duty of loyalty. For instance, if we use a local example, you have been of assistance to my family. One way or the other, probably we were in a big problem. We were being evicted from our land, and then this benevolent person, so to say, comes and helps your family sort out that problem, or has paid school fees. You know how people are deprived. And then you say, okay, now you, Herbert, go and work for this kind of a person in their farm, in their company. This is one of the people who have been good to us. You get there, you didn't know that this person actually exploits people at their premises. So because you owe them, let me just finish this point on debt bonding. You owe them a duty of loyalty because they assisted your family. So you stay in enslavement simply because you cannot walk out on somebody who was benevolent to you before.
Please don't get me wrong. I'm very with you on this. But don't you think you have watched a tree grow? It's bearing too much fruit, and now you're cutting all the branches and hoping that it never bears fruit again. Why am I saying this? One, we all know the reason why this is happening. We all know the reason why people are caught up in jobs and can't live, because there's a lot of unemployment in the country, and people, some are walking into these jobs with no documents of work. How many maids have any document to be in that job? So honestly, they have no say in this job. This is their only chance of survival. Two, when you go to schools, down to primary schools, when you go to secondary schools, how many of these people know their rights? How many people of this, they go ahead and study Said, and he's moved from wherever to wherever. How many of them are studying? Do they know their rights? Do they understand slavery? And do they understand where? Because this is all knowledge. If a child grows up not knowing their rights, not knowing that the limits of how much they can be worked or how much they should be paid. We have had the discussion of the minimum wage that somehow has never borne fruit, but now we are up on the tree trying to cut all the branches.
Yeah, you know, I would approach that in two ways. The first thing I would say is that I would not want to believe that there is completely no effort in making people aware of what constitutes violation of human rights and what doesn't. Because every other day, the Human Rights Commission, I have seen programs on NTV, when they try to sensitize people on what constitutes their right to life, their right to liberty, and their right to employment. Two, I understand the problem of unemployment. It is definitely severe. And as a country, we must find a way to deal with the aspects of unemployment, which is why, as a member of the Committee on National Economy, government has on a few occasions come up with projects that they hope to emphasize on skilling Ugandans so that people become much more practical in terms of being able to do certain things for themselves using the skills they have so as to survive rather than become enslaved. I support that because I know that it has a multiplier effect in dealing with the problem of people being desperate because they don't have what to do. However, by and large, I would like us to look at the aspect that dealing with this vice, we have to start somewhere. We cannot say that because a tree has grown, it has branches, it has borne fruits, therefore we set aside. Sometimes you say, okay, fine, that tree exists, but the fruit is actually poisonous. You find a way, either you cut it down or you uproot it. So we are starting somewhere. We want to put in place a law that deals with, one, perpetrators of slavery, people who actually procure and enslave others. We are also trying to look at the aspect of rehabilitation and reintegration of the victims of slavery. That's why in this bill we provide for, one, protection of the victims, because during trial sometimes dealing with modern day slavery requires gruesome extraction of evidence. If somebody has been a subject of sexual exploitation, for instance, you're not going to simply have to interview her and then let her speak everything in detail, maybe in a public court. You have to find a way in the bill on how to protect such victims. Secondly, you know that sometimes when people become part of a cartel that enslaves people, they are also vicious in the way they react to those that expose them. Right. So you must be able to protect such victims. But most importantly, the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act at the moment does not explicitly deal with repatriation and compensation of victims of modern slavery. So we want to provide for a law, a basis or a framework under which government can work out a way of repatriating you. For instance, if you're a slave out of Uganda, how are you brought back? And two, if you've been found to have been a victim of enslavement, in what way does one, the person who holds you in slavery, compensate you, or where circumstances provide that it was out of negligence of the law enforcers, how does government come in to compensate such victims?
But Honorable, you do mention one thing, which is the victim here. And
Yes.
I believe that the modern slavery bill is pretty much here to protect the victim.
Yes.
So if we talk about the fact that we have a number of people who are here in Uganda, modern day slavery is going on, from people from Rwanda, people from Burundi, people from the DRC, people from China, from India, they're all here, some of them against their will. Will this also be protecting them?
Yeah, you know, the law is applicable within the boundaries of a particular country. If you live in Uganda, then you will be subject to the Ugandan law. So whether you're from whatever country, and as long as at that point you are legally, or even then illegally, but resident in within the sovereignty of Uganda, then you will be subject to the law applicable to Uganda.
Why I ask that question is
Yes.
because a number of times they will say that the law, yes, is here to protect those people as well, but the person who is doing this, you've said the cartels, yes, will have a higher power in a way to make sure that this person remains within the country. So protection of that victim who comes out to say, I am not Ugandan, do not even have my documents, but I am here and I need protection and I need to leave. What happens to someone like that?
Well, you know that the process of law is a learning one, and that's why at the beginning when we had our initial conversation I told you about a consultation process. For instance, you bring out something very new that we are not envisaged. For if the person is non-Ugandan and they volunteer to provide for information on a certain cartel that is running an enslavement ring, what do we do with them? As people who are promoters of this law, it's one of the aspects that we have to go back, because what we have now is the zero draft of the bill. When Parliament gave us leave to introduce it, we are now supposed to consult within civil society, other stakeholders, the fourth estate such as the media.
Yeah, we are.
And yes, and we are doing the part of the consultations already. And then we will also consult some of the government departments, because this is a private members bill. And then we are supposed to mirror other international practices, those that have been able to legislate against and those that have been able to get some successes on modern slavery. Okay. So we will learn from whatever you are giving us, and then by the time we bring the bill for the first reading, you can be sure some of these learning outcomes will be provided.
Let's look at the details in there, and you actually did mention that normal workspace, you're supposed to work for 8 hours. If at all you exceed, then you're entitled to the overtime payment,
yes,
which ideally does not happen in most corporate offices, and not just corporate offices, even in business. So will this bill go into those details, and actually by the time we're seeing it actually bear fruit, that we have employers who are mandated to pay their employees overtime if at all anyone works past 8 hours?
Yeah, you know, every law has what they call scope and limit. The aspect of compensation per se and pay is comprehensively dealt with by the Workmen's Compensation Act, by the Employment Act 2005, and the like. So you find that this law will only look at the aspects to do with exploitation, forced labor, debt bondage, and servitude. Now, where it comes to enforcing what people's actual entitlement in terms of what they receive as pay, then another law takes over. That is why when you are indicted for a particular offense, during trial, the lawyers address themselves to various kinds of laws that could have provided for a particular either vice or an offense that has been committed to you, by you. So this particular law will confine itself to aspects related to what constitutes slavery rather than compensation.
You seem to have bill after bill after bill in Parliament.
Yes.
Is there a criteria with dealing with these bills? Because we've had the workers' bill, we had the women's bill, that all came before a certain bill. And then somehow the other bill seems to be more important than all the other bills. They are put aside and you deal with one bill. This is another bill. So, and we're having another topic of discussion or argument in Parliament that is probably waiting for something more important to come and slide it to the side, and then we can discuss the other. Because there's a list of bills that has been uncleared. It has, you've had first reading, second reading, whatever, and nothing has happened.
Okay, first of all, let me begin by dealing with the answer.
And I'm not trying to cage you into that discussion.
No, I know. Yes. I just let me deal with the aspect of first, second reading. You know, the Ugandan parliament follows the Commonwealth parliamentary system. And when we talk about first reading, second reading, and the aspects of that, it is just simply the process that we take in order to have a law come into place. When we talk about first reading, that is when the bill is being introduced for the first time officially for it to be, and it's committed to a committee. Now, usually the longest process that a bill goes through is the one that happens when it is committed to a committee, because the committee, according to the rules of procedure, is given up to 45 days to deal with the bill, come up with a report. But usually they have aspects of consulting, aspects of talking to other stakeholders, and then come up with a report and recommend to Parliament on how to proceed with that bill. Now, sometimes that process delays because the committee has other various aspects. They have the oversight role, they have the many other agencies besides that law that they look into. So that could occasion for the bill to delay. Now, the second reading is usually something that if the bill is very bulky, it will take about 3 sittings for you to deal. That is where you deal with the bill clause by clause. You know, you move clause 1 to stand part of the bill, then members debate if the amendments, they introduce them. If not, they carry it as it is. Now, the third reading, for emphasis sake, is the shortest part of the bill, because it's just simply when a mover of the bill or the minister pronounces that it has been read for the second time and therefore it do pass. So that is more like it. Now, how to prioritize? There are things that make laws either move faster or go slow. Sometimes the responsiveness of the line ministry, if they are not keen, especially if it is a government bill, there is no way Parliament can stampede the processes. Number 2, for a private member's bill such as this one, sometimes there are limitations. Like there are aspects that require some funds, like the consultations. If now I have to go on and consult. If other civil society, other stakeholders who are interested in modern slavery do not come in to support the process, I may not, for instance, be able to hold consultative meetings because you have to hire a venue, you have to do this, because there is no direct provision in the Parliament budget to support a private member's bill. Number 2, a private member's bill such as this one requires of me to obtain a certificate of financial implication from Minister of Finance. Usually, private members' bills are not very popular with government because it's like you are indicting government that you have not provided for legislation for this aspect. Now, as a member of Parliament, I'm doing it on behalf of the people. No government would be very happy with that. So it can take you a process of back and forth to get that certificate. Usually now, the rules have been amended to state that if in 60 days from the day of request you don't give that certificate, Parliament can proceed without it. Last but not least, of course, there are also sometimes human failings. I mean, I can start on a process, but if I am not convicted about it, if I don't have the passion for it, I went into it for political purposes, on the way you can burn gas and then
but you will not burn gas on this one.
No, not quite.
Okay, I
am passionate about it.
So we'll see the light of day.
Thank you.
What I like about this conversation is now I know why most of these bills take a long time, because the financial implication of
that's what you pick from the entire process,
for the consultative meetings and all that.
Yeah.
And the other one was fast-tracked because the money was
that we can't really speak about at this point in time. But today morning we have been trying to get into the inside bit of the anti-slavery bill, and as of this morning we have learnt a lot. We live in the 21st century, but modern slavery is going on. As we wait for it to become a law, we're praying that that happens. You as a person within the community, start to look out for the people that are maybe working in different houses. try and start to ask a few questions and maybe notice, just be a bit more keen with what's going on there. But we have been joined by Honorable Herbert Ariko. He is the Member of Parliament for Sorority Municipality. Thank you so much. And we pray that all will go well, because I think it's a very good initiative.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it really is. Morning at NTV continues. We're coming back with a business update with Mala.
Play and win every 10 minutes. For every 1,000 you spend, it gives you 1 entry into the jackpot this Sunday.
On MTN, simply dial *165*33#. That's *165*33#. Then enter your 3 lucky numbers. Then enter your 1,000 shillings. And on Airtel, dial *185